Jimapollo says, you once told us how Jamie was upset with your impatient and rapid style of building because he wanted to plan and check everything multiple times. So just a point of refinement of your question. It wasn't that Jamie was upset with my impatient and rapid style of building. It's just that it wasn't his style of building. So our joke was that if we had an hour to execute a solution, Jamie would sit there and do math for like 51 minutes and then spend the last 9 minutes just assembling this thing. Whereas I would spend the time building this object 5 times and my last iteration would work and be delivered within the hour. That's our two styles. But your question then is, but how did the crew get along with your way of working? You know, there was no right or wrong in the way that we attacked problems. So the way that I'm trying to think of, like, if there was any special accommodation made, it's not really. It's also, it's build by build, it's day by day, and it's also kind of mood by mood. There are days when you can cover everything and everyone's feeling great, and there are days when there's a crunch and it's difficult and you got to marshal your forces and maybe you're not covering everything. Or maybe, you know, you're stressed out. But to say, so your question implies, you're asking, was there a sort of central way in which the crew dealt with Jamie and I based on our working styles? I was gonna say no, but I'm not on, I was a member of that crew, but they might have an answer that I don't know about. That's absolutely true. You might want to ask a MythBusters crew member that question, because it's plausible that there are ways in which they accommodated Jamie and Tori and Carrie and Grant and Scotty and everybody else, that the crews accommodated our various personality differences in all sorts of different ways. You know, I had some cameramen, look, I had one cameraman for about a year who didn't care about any of the builds that we were doing, which is fine. It's not his job. It wasn't his job to care, but the fact that he was less involved intellectually with what we were doing showed in the sort of lazy way he would sort of button on and then wait for something to happen. This is in contrast to most of my cameramen on the show, who were really involved in the build and would anticipate with their camera moves. One of my cameramen, Tim Elwood, I understood really early on that he was a natural, amazing maker of three-dimensional things just from understanding how he could anticipate where my hands were going to go while doing a build. So I'm sure there were all sorts of ways in which the crew accommodated the hosts. It's a difficult thing, right? You're the frontispiece of this show. A lot of pressure's on you, and also there's a lot to get done. And the crew understood that and took that seriously. Like sometimes a host would be like, "I just need everyone to leave me alone so I can tackle this." That certainly happened with all of us at different times, but most of the time it was a pretty egalitarian sort of open atmosphere. 3 or 4 stories were boiling along at the same time. Crew, Jamie and I and the other hosts would be like executing our solutions. So yeah, I think that's a question for a MythBusters crew member. Let's see here. Farrell's props or Farrell's props, I'm not sure which, asks, when shooting MythBusters, how would you decide which custom rigs or setups you would save for future episodes? Having worked in effects myself, I've seen many rigs be parted out or thrown away. Well, there are questions to answer about your question here. The main reason a rig or build would get saved is because of personal affection on the part of any of the hosts that built that thing. And I will say that when any of the 5 of us executed a sort of an aesthetic approach to an object, we grew some real affection around that object. So and actually, if it was anything aesthetic like the Chinese rocket chair, we made 2 of those and only one of them was destroyed. So the other went into the blueprint room for the next 12 years or so. When it comes to individual small parts on a rig, like little U-joints or some gear escapement that we built. Again, since we were purpose buying stuff for production, we frequently would leave the things on the rig that it was built for. Yeah, again, if it was at all elaborate, we wanted to save it. We liked our work. We liked seeing it. We liked using it. We liked reusing it. But if it was parts, a good portion of the time, the rigs we were building were from some of Jamie's expendables, right? You know, the bin full of pneumatic cylinders he would have, or you know, or wire lugs or stuff like that. In those cases, absolutely, those things got completely dismantled and put back into the shop population. So, to answer your question, both. Some rigs were dismantled and some remained, and the criteria for what we did with them was all based on the personal affection of the host making the call at that given time. Patrick Hennessy, here's a fine one to finish on. Patrick Hennessy said, during an episode, the entire team combined to help you find a remedy for your and Grant's proclivity for seasickness. And a remedy was found, but why was it never used afterwards? Or did the producers ban the two of you from using it in favor of good television? No, they did not. No, so if I remember correctly, the method that worked for me the best in the seasickness episodes we were testing was ginger pills. They worked better than the other methods we were trying because we were trying homespun remedies. We weren't trying things like Dramamine or scopolamine. And scopolamine is what they give you before you ride in the Vomit Comet or the, it'll also, in larger doses, turn you into a zombie. But the ginger worked for me in that episode. And when we went down to the Bahamas, the very next time we were filming a Shark Week episode, which was a few months later, I brought a supply of ginger pills only to find myself miserable and seasick for the first day until we got me a supply of Dramamine, and taking Dramamine 4 times a day, whatever the periodicity was, kept me usable and useful for the duration. We were on the water for, I think, 12 days in these 3-foot swells. It was heady and it was intense. So it wasn't that there's some conspiracy that we gave up the ginger pills. It was that the store-bought methods worked better than any of our homespun recipes. And in order to be a functioning host of this television show, I chose the store-bought remedy. Thank you for watching. I wanted to talk to you about Tested membership. The Tested members are a key community that we find really, really remarkable. That's very separate from Tested and from YouTube. The Tested members, they buy each other memberships during our live streams. So if you're wondering whether to become a member, watch one of our live streams and someone may just give you one. It is hard to overestimate how much the Tested members actually make possible on this channel. They give us a lot of wiggle room. They give us a huge amount of feedback.
That's a member right now.
Thank you so much for enjoying your membership. Link in the description for everything you need to know. And for all the members out there, thank you, thank you, thank you.